This audio has been taken from the Citizens Archive of Pakistan's Oral History Project.
Okay, so today is the 23rd of May 2023. We're sitting with Mr. Sadrudin from the Citizens Archive of Pakistan's Oral History Project. Taking the interview is Alia Tayati. For audio recording, we have Aruj, and for video recording, we have Saad. This is our first interview with Mr. Samir, and we're going to be talking to him about his life history and conducting oral history. Sir, if I could have your full name for the record.
It's Samir Sadrudin.
And your place and your date of birth?
December 13, 1953.
And your place of birth?
Karachi.
Your father's name?
Sadrudin Muhammad Abdullah.
And what did your father do?
He was an accountant.
And your mother's name?
Mehrunissa Sadrudin.
And your mother, what did she do?
She is an entrepreneur. Yeah, she used to work in the travel business and all kinds of other things.
And do you have any siblings?
One sister,
Can I have a name?
Sabrina.
And are you married?
She's married.
No, you.
Oh, am I married? Yes, I'm married.
Can I have your wife's name?
Nahid Mashukullah.
And what does your wife do?
She's an architect.
And so do you have any kids?
I have two sons. Yeah, they're both in Canada.
Can I have the names?
Sasha Ali and Zia Ali.
So I know you were born after the partition of the Indian subcontinent in 1947, but do you remember having any conversations with your elders about where you were at the time of partition? If you were always in Karachi or did you move?
The parents, yeah, I know they were both born here. They were long time residents, their parents' ancestry. So we're Sindhis. So yeah, there was no move involved.
So you're always
Just
in
stayed
Karachi.
here, yeah.
And sir, if I could ask you from the time of your birth, all major cities or countries that you have resided in, not traveled to, but lived in.
So from Karachi, I moved to Miami, Florida. I was there for 4 years. And then I moved to Canada. I was in Edmonton for a few years. Then I was in Winnipeg, Manitoba for a few years, where I did my master's. And the rest of the time was in Toronto. And after many years, came back to Karachi.
Can you tell me what years you were in Karachi initially?
When I left, 1971.
And when did you come back?
2009.
If I could just know about your education, your earliest memory of your first school.
Of my school.
First school, like kindergarten, playgroup, whatever.
Yeah, it was a long time ago. So there was a school in our neighborhood in Garden, Juffelhurst it was called. And, but I was there just for a brief period and then managed to get admission to the grammar school. So moved to the grammar school and stayed there until I finished my O-levels. And I didn't stay for A-levels. I left right after.
Your O-levels. And that was what year?
71.
Right. And after that?
After that, I went to Miami. I was there in a community college for 2 years. I went to the University of Southern Florida for a year and worked for a year and then moved to Canada.
So you were in Florida from 1979?
4 years, yeah.
1975.
Yeah.
Right. And then you went to Canada.
Mm-hmm.
Did you go there?
I went to Edmonton, Alberta, which is very cold. And mainly worked, but then I felt I needed to get back to university, so I did. Went to the University of Alberta and I got a bachelor's degree in art, history, and sociology. And after being there for about 6 years, I think, I went to Winnipeg, Manitoba, where I started doing my master's. And I did my master's in architecture there. So 8 years in Manitoba, and then moved to Toronto, where I just started working.
So can you tell me about your first job?
So my first job was actually in Miami, and it was great fun. I was like 19 years old, I think. And I used to being an architecture student, they would let me do a little bit of drawing, but mainly I was doing the printing. In those days they had ammonia printing, and so I would do that. I'd run around the office. That's like a boy around the office, you know, printing and delivering and drawing and going to sites, measuring them up. So it was my initial foray into architecture. It was great fun.
And after that?
And then after that, I came to Canada, and I was working for a company that did drafting for a prefabricated house company. So we would do the drawings for these houses, which were prefabricated, brought to the site and assembled. So it was kind of interesting because we had to work with a kit of parts, and it really gave me a good insight into how framing houses and so on work in the Canadian context, which is very different than anywhere else. So yeah, I did that for a while, then went back to university. And then the third job was after I finished my bachelor's. It was in a real architect's office, and I got to start designing and working on bigger projects. So it was very exciting.
What was the name of the company?
It was called Vaikunas Jameson. Yeah. Vaitkunas and Jameson, Jamieson.
It's also in Canada.
Yeah, in Edmonton as well.
Right, then?
Well, then after that, I moved to Winnipeg, where I did my master's in architecture. I worked for a small company there for about 2-3 years, and then moved to Toronto, where the big architects were. And I got a job with a big firm, Webb's Rafa, which is like one of the largest firms in Canada. And through them, I got to work all over the world, you know, in the Middle East, in China, and of course in Canada. So that was a lot of fun. And while I was working there, I was posted in Hong Kong for 7 months to work on a project, which is really exciting. And got to travel a lot to Saudi Arabia and the Emirates, because we were doing projects there as well, Lebanon, Beirut. So that was an exciting job, yeah.
Right, and after that?
And then after that, I worked for another company, B&H, and I was project managing the local jobs in Toronto mainly. I was there for 5-6 years, I think. And then I moved on to yet another company, and called NOR International. And I was there only for a year. And then I got this job at the Aga Khan University. And I moved to Boston, where I worked for 2 years with the principal architect that designed this campus, Bayat Associates. And it was part of our design for the new Faculty of Arts and Science campus on Link Road, just outside of Karachi. So it was like 2 million square feet, very ambitious, big project, which unfortunately didn't materialize. And I had already moved to Karachi by then. So then I started working on projects on campus, and I was thinking very much about going back to Canada because that big project was not working out. So they sent me to Africa, where they were developing a similar big project. And I was there for 2 years. I was in Arusha, Tanzania, which was really beautiful. Very exciting time. And it was, again, the design phase of the project. Loved working there. And after 2 years, this job came up as director of director of the design office here in Karachi. So I took this job and moved back to Karachi.
Right. If I were to take you back to growing up in Karachi, can you tell me what it was like for a little boy? What did you do? What kind of activities did you have? What was your favorite meal? Where did you go with your family? Where did you go with your friends? What was life like in the 50s here?
So I think that I have very fond memories of my childhood. I came from a modest middle-class family. Both my parents worked very hard to put us through the grammar school and try and, keep us in some level of society. But I think I was a bit of a loner. I was quiet, introverted, and I loved sports. I used to go to the gymkhana every day for swim, and instead of playing cricket, I enrolled myself at the Alliance Française to learn French. Don't ask me why, but it was an escape, I think. So yeah, kind of activities that were surrounded around myself. But it was really nice. It was quiet. I loved the school. I loved the friends that I made during school. And grammar school was quite an amazing institution then. I'm sure it is now too. But there was a lot of exposure. We had a lot of foreign teachers that would come from University of Cambridge. They would do their internship and so on. But we got that foreign input, which I think made the school richer in many ways. So very fond memories. Family was close. It was just the four of us, my mom, dad, and my sister and I. And we would spend a lot of time together, We would go to Shazan. And of course, the Karachi Gymkhana. Yeah, but, I was 16 when I left. So it was a relatively short period of time while I was in Karachi.
So as a 16-year-old, or from your perspective of 16, what is Karachi like as a city? If we talk about the urban landscape, what is Karachi Gymkhana like at that time? What was Shazan like? Not just as in the restaurant, but the areas around it, traffic, development, greenery, people, mobility.
Well, Karachi was quite a lovely city. I think it still has a lot of potential. And it was very different. It was a long time ago, and all cities evolve and change and grow and sometimes decay, sometimes flourish. But Karachi, one thing I do remember, it was not as green as it is today. I tell everybody that, it's dense, yes, there's a lot of buildings, a lot of construction going on, but it's still much greener than I thought it was. I remember the street I lived on had just few trees, and the houses had no trees, they would have the occasional papaya tree growing somewhere or a neem here or something. There was no real landscaping. Very few people had lawns. But I know that today Karachi is greener, maybe because where I'm sitting makes a difference. But it was cleaner, a lot cleaner than it is today. And there were places you could go. It was safer, of course. As a kid, I used to go everywhere alone. Even at 16, I would drive my car and go here or there. Traffic was a lot more manageable. And all our venues like Fair Hall or Mahatta Palace and so on were quite accessible and frequented, you know. So, and the beach, of course, which was our favorite hangout place, you know, Hawke's Bay or Sandspit, whatever. I didn't even know French Beach existed at the time, but it was great to go there. And so, you know, these are some of my memories. And of course, having all that fantastic food, you know, off the street, which was safe at the time. We would even drink the tap water. It was like no big deal. So, yeah, it was a different Karachi.
Right. You told me that you connected with the Alhan project when you took on the project and moved to Boston. Can you tell me how that happened? What were the factors involved and what prompted you to make that decision? Because before then, you had been working in a very Western environment.
Right.
Working in Western design. Alhan was a shift, maybe not, if you could tell us about Alhan's design philosophy. What prompted you to do that? And how it differs from where you started?
So, you know, being an Ismaili and being attracted to architecture as a young boy, the Aga Khan, and of course, being an Ismaili, we are very close to the Aga Khan and his vision. And he himself loves architecture. He just loves it. So there was a role model there, you know, and it was always my dream to work with the institutions. But somehow it never really happened, and I was off in Canada, and I used to volunteer a lot on local projects, the Ismaili projects. So there were Jamaat Khanas being built, or there were renovations happening for certain offices, the council offices. And so I would always jump in, and me being in, the architects are rare in the Ismaili community. There are a lot of doctors and accountants and so on, engineers, but very few architects. So I was sort of a bit of a novelty, and I took advantage of it. And I worked a lot for many years as a volunteer on all the Jamaat Khanas. And in doing so, I made friends, associations. And one of my associates, he was senior, but we worked together, and then all of a sudden he disappeared, and I didn't know where he went. And out of the blue, many years later, I got a phone call from him in Toronto, and he said, would you like to meet for lunch? I said, sure. And so it was nice catching up. And then he told me that he had landed this job with the Aga Khan University, and he had moved to Karachi. And he asked me if I would be interested in joining them. So I said, wow, this is out of the blue. And so I said, I would love to, but I can't, because I was caring for my parents at the time, and I have two young kids. I was divorced and single parent, so a lot of responsibility. So I said, I would love to, but I really can't leave them and move there. He said, well, think about it, you know, and I'll keep checking in with you. So he pursued me for 2 years. And in the meantime, my dad passed away, and my older son went off to university. So I thought, you know, and my mom was being cared for by my sister. So I thought, you know, why not, you know? So I just packed up my little kid, and I told him, yeah, okay, we're going to do this. So I had a great job in Toronto, really good job, but I was ready for this adventure, you know? And so we just packed up, got in the car, and moved to Boston. We were there for 2 years, my son and I, the little guy. And he traveled with me everywhere. And he came to Karachi after 2 years. He was here until he finished his high school, and then he went back to Canada. Well, that's how it happened.
Did you ever get to meet His Highness?
I got to meet His Highness, very fortunate, many times. And so we have board meetings every 3 times a year. And it was my job to present to him updates on the architecture, updates on new designs, which we were doing in-house, and because he's keenly interested in how this campus evolved. Not just this campus, but even Africa and Afghanistan. We presented a scheme to him on FMIC in Kabul. So yes, I got to meet him many times, and every time was amazing experience.
Tell me the first time you met him.
So, you know, as Ismailis get to meet His Highness, especially when I was a boy, we have when he visits your city, then we all gather and see him. But in a professional setup, the first time I met him was 2010, I think. I was here in Karachi and working on a project in Africa, and the project director there said, we are presenting this new school in Mozambique, and I would like you to come to this meeting to become familiar with it. So that's why I went for that meeting. There were only about 10 or 12 of us in the room, and His Highness came, and he was very gracious, you know. He spoke to all of us in a very personal way. And then the architects presented the scheme, and we all had our input, and that was the first meeting.
Right. Take me with you in that room. So what was he wearing? What was your impression? What conversation? The impact of that conversation on your commitment to work and the way it manifested in the work itself?
Well, we were seated in the room, and then he came, and he was always wearing a beautiful suit, dark suit, and he came in and actually looked at everybody, welcomed them. I was introduced to him, and he asked where I was from. I told him I'd come in from Karachi, and so he said, that's wonderful. And he spoke to everyone, you know, greeted them, and then sat down. But it was during the architectural presentation where I actually got to see his insight and how he was, the questions he was asking displayed that he knew architecture and his concern for the user group. He was always asking about daylight in the space. He was asking about equity for all of the classrooms. He was asking about, not one classroom should be better than the other, you know, how the children would meet in the common areas, what would their activities be, and how does the space facilitate those activities. He had some comments on the outdoor area, the safety of the space. So he had deep insight about the context. Questions he asked about Mozambique, he may not ask about in Canada, you know, because it is a completely different context. So I was very impressed. And through that, I understood that if I were ever to present to him, I better think about all these things, you know, and be 100% sure that I know that the design solution meets all this criteria, you know, how the user's gonna interact in that space, how will they live, what will be the quality of that space. And then in subsequent meetings, it became even more obvious his commitment to ensuring that the architecture really is the best it could be for the users.
Right, and talk to me, you told me that he has a lot of interest in design, and His Highness obviously comes from a thought, a Islamic thought. It is embedded in his identity. How does that translate into design? And how does it translate into community design and non-community, yet design itself?
So, I mean, he has made many speeches on architecture, and at the opening ceremonies of many facilities, he has said a lot of words about the architecture. But this is my personal deduction of his philosophy of architecture, is that Islamic architecture is not about domes and arches and minarets, you know. Islamic architecture is much more about engaging the community. It is about how people in an Islamic context, what is their social setup, how do they interact with each other, and how does this facility actually enhance that experience. So, for example, the courtyard. Okay, the courtyard in Islamic architecture is always an on space, the Japanese concept of on space. So you come from the vast outdoors, you come through a portal into a smaller garden, which is sort of which transitions you from outside to the inside. So it prepares you for smaller spaces that you would go into. And this transition helps shape the way people behave in these spaces. So the courtyard became a family space, or in a masjid, it became an interaction space for people who had a common goal. They were there to pray, they were there to maybe educate their children. It was all a common goal. Whereas outside, you've got the market, you've got business going on, you've got all kinds of distractions. So it is less focused, it's much more distracting. But once you're inside, this focus happens, and that safe environment actually promotes that kind of activity, you know, promotes and prepares you for your prayer and the way you're going to reflect and so on. So this is just a very simple example of what my understanding of Islamic architecture is. And you will see that the community engagement is a very big part, because when a community is engaged, they bring with them all of these social values. They bring with them an understanding of how they will behave in that space. And if you see, the Aga Khan Award for Architecture is always given to projects not because they are architectural showpieces, but because they've gone through a process where the community is deeply engaged. And the result is something that is so positive for the community, much more so than for the architectural icon, as it were, you know. So I think this is my understanding of his concept of architecture. And then this concept is valid in any context, right? You could, the understanding of the community in Japan, for example, the community gets engaged. They have their culture, they have their norms. Once they are engaged in the architecture, it shapes how they want it to be, you know, that engagement. And that could happen anywhere in Spain, it could happen in the Islamic world, it could happen in the Christian world. And the awards are not restricted to Islamic buildings in Islamic countries. The awards are open for all kinds of countries and all kinds of contexts. And that's the beauty, but the key factor is the community engagement. And because really, if you want to build a house, you come to an architect, you tell the architect, you know, I want 5 bedrooms, I like a lounge or whatever. It's only then that the architect will start responding to what your needs are. So why not for a public building or a community space to really get them engaged?
And I mean, you spoke about this, and many conversations I've had, you've spoken about light and space.
Yeah.
What does it mean?
Places that are naturally lit. I mean, there's so many studies done that daylight has a huge impact on your psyche and your performance and your your endorphins and so on. So daylight is very important for human beings, of course, especially in a work environment, because when it's light, you work. When it's dark, you sleep. So why not have daylight? And in most cultures, especially in the West, daylight is cherished. It's very precious. We take it for granted in Pakistan. And in fact, somehow we associate daylight with heat, and then we put big fat curtains on our windows and shut it out. But I think that daylight is very important. And people are now beginning to realize, I mean, you can see this office building has very few blinds, only where we have a lot of sunlight coming in. In fact, the entire campus is extremely well lit, and there are no dark, dingy spaces. So I think light is important. I mean, I'm not a psychologist, but I've read that it is important for your mental well-being and contributes to your performance at work.
Right. Any specific symbols, design-wise, that are always incorporated in your designs for community projects, etc., and their significance, any that His Highness has specifically said should be embedded in your design, directly, indirectly, informed by, if you could share those?
So the design that I have done for this campus is heavily inspired by the initial concepts, the vision of what this campus would be. And we've kind of followed that through. We've updated it, we've modernized it somewhat, but the principles are the same. And those principles started with simple spaces that are humble and local in context. So if you see the older buildings on campus, they're all painted white, and they all are from the outside. They are this weeping plaster, the red color. There's use of wood and teak that we started off with. We are now looking at alternates because teak has become very rare. And there's just a hint of decoration in the wood jali and in the blue tile, the hala tile that's used. Other than that, the buildings are all about the people and the equipment and the caregiving and so on. So I label them as humble spaces because they are not loud, they are not asking for attention, they are not saying I'm a strong architectural feature, look at me. They are backdrop, they're background. And that's, even if you see, every building is exactly the same in terms of its exterior finishing, in terms of its modularity, in terms of its grid. We have a standard grid that's used all across this campus. So when you look at the campus from afar, no building jumps out as unique compared to the others. It's really a village that everything is equitable and blends in really well. So that has inspired me even in my own personal architectural solutions, is that spaces should be like a canvas for human interaction, and then and they have to be simple so that you can dress them up or you can dress them down or you can change them. They're flexible. The beauty is that the space doesn't take over and actually supports what you're doing.
Right. Just one last question. And when you talk about His Highness in your interactions, and you talk about design and humility, how would you connect them all together?
In my experience with His Highness over many buildings, the intent has always been to create a building that is, that's not does not become an icon. I think the idea is, as I mentioned earlier, it's about function and it's about support. But the building also must be beautiful. It must be a delight to go into. It must have features within it that you can get lost in. You know, the building must tell a story. The building must interact with you, and only an attractive building is something where you want to be. You know, if the building is not attractive, it's uncomfortable, then you don't want to be there. And we have all experienced spaces like that, which are either have too much stimulus or have too much going on, and it actually controls how you think or inhibits how you think. So I think that, and if you look around our campus here, you know, it's the jali and how the light comes through it. And it changes. So as the sun moves, we have this shadow pattern of this beautiful jali moving with it. The water, for example, how it plays through, you know, the landscape. And spaces within, you know, you have clear glass and then you have some glass with etching on it. They're very subtle gestures, but they are still there for you to appreciate and for you to enjoy. I think that's more than anything else. And he feels strongly about that.
If I were to ask you to talk about any specific incidents from your own memories which you feel should definitely be part of your story, what would you like to tell us?
Any specific incident? I think that moving from Canada was one of the most significant things, or the brave things I'd ever done, because I had kind of eased into a life of routine with the children and my parents, and packing up and leaving everything and not knowing when I will return. It's been 15 years, oh God. It took a lot of courage. And as I look back at that time, I think it was such an amazing decision and the right thing to do. It was a bit metaphysical, actually. I feel also it was a little out of control. I think that forces around me kind of pushed me into that situation. So yeah, I think that was one of the most special moments in my life, is that making that decision, and it's been a great experience.
But thank you so much for your time. It was a real pleasure to know your story. This is a release form which gives us permission to use your interview for our archive, and a specific address where you would like us to drop a copy of it.
Okay.
And anybody else from the community that you can think of would like to?
I had been thinking about it, and I'll let you know as soon as I can.
Thank you. Thank you.
This audio has been taken from the Citizens Archive of Pakistan's Oral History Project.